You're aware of only a fraction of what's guiding your life. Right now, as you listen, your heart is beating without your permission. Your lungs are breathing without your instruction. Your body balances itself, digests, heals without a single conscious command. And the same is true for your thoughts, your choices, your instincts. Most of what moves you doesn't come from the surface of the mind. It comes from below. From something deeper, something older. Some call it the subconscious, others call it the soul. Whatever name you give it, this part of you is always speaking. It doesn't shout, it doesn't reason, it signals. Through emotion, through silence, through resistance or resonance, pull or pause, ease or tension. The trouble is, we've been conditioned to trust only what we can explain, to value logic over feeling, to believe clarity must sound like words in the head, not signals in the heart or messages in the body. So when the soul speaks, we override it. We second guess it. We call it doubt. We call it fear. We call it nothing. And yet, underneath every moment of confusion, there's often a truth we've already felt, one we've buried because it didn't fit the narrative we were told to follow. This video is about remembering how to listen again, not to the mind's noise, but to the quiet voice that's always been there. You'll learn how to recognize the difference between mental noise and inner knowing. You'll hear how science and spiritual traditions alike point to the body and subconscious as sources of deep guidance. And you'll walk away with real tools, daily, practical rituals that bring the soul's voice back into focus. You may realize that the answers you've been searching for weren't missing, they were just waiting. Welcome to Beyond Reality. Subscribe. The mind moves fast. It calculates, categorizes, solves, plans. It feeds on logic, memory, and comparison, rushing to label every thought, every sensation, every choice. It thrives in the known, the measurable, the explainable. But beneath all that activity is something else entirely. A presence that doesn't rush. It doesn't argue or panic. It waits. It listens. It knows. That quiet presence, what some call the soul, isn't concerned with whether something looks right on paper. It speaks through resonance, through discomfort, through a calm that can't be explained, or a heaviness that won't go away. Psychologically, we might call this the subconscious, the part of the mind that processes far more than we can consciously track. Neuroscience tells us this part is responsible for most of our decision-making, well before we're aware a choice is being made. Brain scans show that our subconscious reacts to outcomes seconds before our conscious brain catches up. This means that your body knows before your mind understands. The body is a messenger of the soul, a gut feeling, a sudden shift in breath, a tightness in your chest before saying yes to something you don't want. These are not random signals, they're not just stress or coincidence, they're intelligence, subtle but precise, and yet we're taught to override them. We choose what's practical, what pleases others, what aligns with expectations. We ignore that quiet protest inside, then wonder why we feel lost or anxious. Spiritual teachers across traditions have spoken of this split for centuries. Jung called it the divide between the ego and the self. Contemplative monks describe the soul's voice as emerging in silence, often drowned by the mind's noise. In Eastern traditions, the heart-mind, or Shen, is said to know the path long before logic does. But this knowing isn't loud. It doesn't force. It simply offers. The mind will say, "This makes sense, this is smart, this is safe." The soul might say nothing at all, but your body will feel it. A weight, a pull, a restlessness, or, on rare occasions, a sudden peace so deep it catches your breath. This contrast is why so many feel confused. The voice that demands attention isn't always the one that tells the truth, and so we forget. Not because the soul stopped speaking, but because the noise got too loud. Because we trained ourselves to seek clarity outside when it was always waiting within. Some of your hardest decisions didn't feel hard in the beginning. You already knew, but you second-guessed. You collected opinions. You waited until you could justify the knowing, until it no longer felt like knowing at all. This is not a failure, it's a pattern that can be unlearned. The next step isn't about finding something new, it's about remembering what's always been there. You don't need to make the soul louder, you just need to make space to hear it. There's a truth many people carry but rarely say aloud. Deep down, they already know. They know the relationship isn't right. They know the job is draining their spirit. They know the move, the shift, the risk they've been avoiding is not a new idea, it's a returning one. But knowledge without trust turns into confusion. And over time, that inner knowing begins to feel distant. It doesn't disappear, it waits. The soul doesn't communicate with certainty. It speaks in sensation, in the tightening of your stomach before a yes, in the lightness that floods your chest when something finally feels aligned, in the deep sigh that escapes your lips when you stop pretending. These aren't passing moods, they are messages. Science has started to catch up with this idea. Antonio Damasio's somatic marker hypothesis revealed that our emotions, often felt first in the body, guide our decisions long before conscious reasoning does. The subconscious responds instantly, sending signals that the thinking mind struggles to interpret or explain. This is why a decision can make perfect sense and still feel wrong, or why you can feel peaceful even while stepping into the unknown. The soul doesn't argue, it doesn't convince, it simply brings a signal, expansion, contraction, resonance, resistance, and waits for you to notice. Most people don't ignore their intuition because they lack it. They ignore it because it doesn't always match the narrative they've built. They fear what they already know will require them to change. But still, the signs show up. The dream that won't go away, the repeated pattern that keeps surfacing, the ache that arrives when you betray what matters, even the sense of déjà vu when something clicks, as if you finally remembered instead of learned. Purpose is often mistaken for something we must go out and find. But real purpose doesn't feel like discovery. It feels like recognition, like something you already carried but buried beneath approval-seeking, fear, or the need to explain yourself. You may not know every detail, but the essence, you've known it since before the questions began. This is why reconnecting with the soul doesn't start with searching, it starts with listening. Noticing where your energy contracts when something feels off. Paying attention to the moments of quiet certainty. Tracking how your body reacts when you betray or honor yourself. The compass isn't broken, it's buried under the habit of second-guessing. You're not starting from scratch, you're returning, and the path forward isn't built with logic alone. It's shaped by noticing what has always been true. You've had the signs, you've felt the signals. The next step is to begin listening on purpose. What you'll find isn't foreign, it's familiar. If the soul speaks in subtle signals, the key is learning how to hear them. Not once, not only in crisis, but every day in the quiet moments where clarity begins. This kind of listening isn't about technique, it's about relationship. The more you return to it, the more it reveals. There are 3 practices that open this channel, simple enough to start today, powerful enough to shift the course of your inner life over time. The first is morning stillness. Before the phone, before the headlines, before you enter the day, sit. Just 5 minutes. No answers required. Place a hand on your chest or belly and ask one open question. What wants to be known today? There may be no words. That's fine. What matters is the listening. When practiced daily, this brief stillness creates a space the mind usually fills with noise. Over time, you begin to feel a difference between your mind's urgency and your soul's steadiness. The second is the body compass check-in. Every time you face a decision, big or small, bring your attention to your body, not to analyze, but to sense. Do you feel openness or tension? A soft pull or a tightening? These cues aren't random. Studies in somatic psychology and trauma research show that the body reacts faster than thought. The vagus nerve, which connects the gut, heart, and brain, sends messages upward, often alerting you to danger or resonance before the mind can explain why. Notice which options bring a subtle release, which ones make your breath shallower. You don't need to act on every signal, but tracking them builds trust. The third is soul journaling. Each night, reflect briefly. Where did I ignore a nudge today? When did I feel aligned even if I didn't act? Write it without judgment. Patterns will emerge. Certain truths will keep knocking until you acknowledge them. Others will dissolve once named. The point isn't perfection, it's practice. These 3 rituals aren't about fixing, they're about remembering. The more often you pause to feel, to sense, to reflect, the more clearly you'll recognize the soul's language. This isn't a process of waiting for thunder, it's learning to recognize the whisper. And something happens when you do this consistently. Decisions feel cleaner, not because they're easy, but because they're honest. Relationships shift, not because others change, but because you stop abandoning yourself. Direction returns, not because life gets simpler, but because you're no longer chasing answers outside of you. Your internal compass doesn't need batteries, it needs attention and a little devotion. The mind will always have opinions. The soul is quiet, but it never lies. The soul never stopped speaking. It simply waited for you to remember the sound of your own truth, not the voice shaped by pressure, fear, or expectation. The one beneath all that. The one that feels still, ancient, and familiar. Because it's been with you from the beginning. Each time you pause, even for a breath, you invite that voice forward. Each time you notice your body's quiet signals, you build trust. Each time you sit with the unknown and listen anyway, something shifts. Clarity doesn't always arrive in words. Sometimes it lands as calm. Sometimes it comes as restlessness that refuses to leave until you pay attention. Sometimes it's the absence of doubt, not because everything is certain, but because you're no longer betraying yourself. This path asks for patience, not perfection. It doesn't demand answers, just honesty. You won't always get confirmation right away. You may still question. But what changes is where you're listening from. Try the practices for a week, not to get somewhere, but to feel closer to something that was never far away. Truth doesn't knock loudly, it doesn't need to. When it arrives, your body knows. Your breath deepens. The tension loosens. The next step reveals itself without force. And if this resonated, consider subscribing. Thank you for watching. Wherever you are in your journey, I'm grateful we crossed paths.